Hello, everyone. Good evening. Tonight, I have a very different stream planned from the usual archival discourses that I do every Tuesday. Tonight, I'm going to be discussing and reading through some texts on Ismail I, the founder of the Safavid dynasty, the Safavid Empire. And one of the reasons I'm sort of doing this is because, as people know, I've going to be doing a series on modern Iran. The very first episode, the sort of introductory episode I did last Saturday, looking at pre-modern Iran from the Achaemenids to the At-Kalanu Confederation. And the first proper episode I plan to do in a couple of weeks, around the middle of April, with my good friend Hunker, who's going to be the co-host for this series. For the first episode, we're going to be sort of looking at the founding of the sort of, the modern Iran, the foundation of the Safavid Empire under Isma'il, as well as his successors, Tamazb, and going all the way to the death of Abbas the Great in 1629. And so the broad course of this series is going to more focus on the sort of political and sort of religious aspects, and to a certain extent the military as well, of modern Iranian history. But I've been doing a lot of reading on Shah Ismail, and he's a figure I'm absolutely fascinated by. There's so many interesting elements to him, because not only is he a great man of history, founding, being a great imperial founder, but he's also got all these interesting artistic aspects to him. So he wrote under a pen name called Katai. So he wrote a lot of poetry. He's also, people who don't know, the Safavids were Sufis originally, which is sort of like an Islamic mystic, and there's a lot of the Sufist elements to his rule and how he conducts himself. And also there's his relationship with the Kizilbash, or who his sort of Turkmen devotees and followers. And due to the huge amount of content that's got to be covered in this series, I'm not really going to have time to be able to go through some of these more artistic or esoteric aspects to Ismail in the series and main episodes. So what I'm going to do with this episode is look at these more, interesting sort of poetic and mystical elements of Ismail, to sort of better explore these aspects of him, because I just think it's really, really fascinating. And one thing that's a bit of a shame is I feel that as you sort of see the Safavid dynasty progress forwards into history, you start to see them shed a lot of these old Sufistic elements, which is a bit of a shame, because there's a great sort of cultural richness and uniqueness to it. So, first thing we're going to read through is, I've just got a bit from an annex of Arnold Toynbee's study of history, where he's looking at the quote unquote career of Ismail during his sort of early reign and his early life. So I just want to read this as a bit of an introductory to sort of set the stage. Okay, let's make that a bit bigger. Okay. So the career of Ismail Shah Safawi down to AD 1511. Ismail's career provokes two questions. First, how was it that the heir to the headship of a religious order, and an order which was committed to non-violence by its tenets, now burst upon the world as a military conqueror and became the founder of a political empire? And second, what was Ismail's ultimate military and political aim? The answer to the first question is that the metamorphosis of the Safawi organization from a religious order, propagating itself by a pacific missionary enterprise, into a political power, extending its dominion by military force, had been accomplished already by Ismail Shah's grandfather, Sheikh Junaid. Militabad is essentially, his tenure or reign. That's AD 1447 to 56. Who was the grandson of Sheikh Khwaja Ali and the great-grandson of Sheikh Safi, Sheikh Safi being the founder of the Safavid order in the early 14th century. Sheikh Junaid was evidently tempted to abandon Imami principles, revolutionize Safawi practice, and try his fortune in the political and military arena by the political vacuum that was created in Iran and Iraq by the utter disintegration of the Timurid Empire after the death of Shah Rukh, an event which occurs in the very year of Sheikh Junaid's accession, 58 AD. Sheikh Junaid raised a military force of 10,000 Saints militant, or Guzat-i-Sufiyah, um, and his son and successor Sheikh Haidar Militabat AD 1456-88, who was the father and predecessor to Shah Isma'il, gave the Safari troops their distinctive uniform, a scarlet cap of 12 gauze, which gained them the nickname of Redheads or Kizilbash. It should also be noted that the reason that the scarlet cap has 12 gauze is that this is a reference to the 12 imams of Shia Islam, this grand sort of succession of leaders of the of descending all the way from Ali, the son-in-law of Muhammad and husband of his daughter Fatima. In the Shia religion, there's these various leaders called imams. So it's Ali, then Ali's two sons, Hassan and Hussein, and then from Hussein, who's the third imam, all other of the 9 imams are descended from the line of Hussein. So both Sheikh Junaid and Sheikh Haidar fell in battle. It would be seen that the Safawi military tradition was inherited and not created by Isma'il, though Isma'il himself was the first of his line to pursue the military career with success. For weal or woe, however, the Safawi house had taken decisively to militarism between Junaid's accession in 1447 and Isma'il's in AD 1499-1500. When we inquire into Isma'il's ultimate aim, when in AD 1499-1500, at the age of 13, he started to turn his inherited military power to account, we find that he aimed at nothing less than the military conquest of the entire Iranic world, and that he proposed to use his power in order to impose the faith of the Shia minority of the Iranic society upon the consciences of the Sunni majority by sheer force. The two objectives have to be distinguished, because the second was a sensational and deplorable departure from the Iranic practice of live and let live, whereas the former was a natural reflection of the social unity of the Iranic world, which had remained unbroken down to Isma'il's day. Isma'il's ecumenical ambitions are revealed in the organization of his army. 2 of his army corps bore the names of Turkmen tribes, the Avshars, or later Afsharids, and the Qajars. Both would become ruling dynasties of Iran from the 18th century. And this Turkish tribal element was perhaps the nucleus, since the Safawi battle cry was in the Turkish language, and the Turkish vernacular was Ismail's own mother tongue, as is testified by the evidence of his poetical works. I should note that when he says Turkish, Ismail specifically is speaking a form of Azeri Turkic, because he was the Safawis or Safavids were from what is now Iranian Azerbaijan, particularly the town of Ardabil. And so it's a form of like Azeri Turkic is what is the Kizilbash and what Ismail would have spoken as his first language, though he was fluent in Persian as well. The majority of the corps, however, bore geographical names which corresponded to the dominions of various Sunni powers of the day. Presumably, the soldiers who served in each of these Safawi corps were actually recruited from the respective countries after which the corps were named, and the names were tantamount to an announcement of Ismail's intention to extend his rule over each of these countries for the military prowess of local adherents who had already married that to his banner. If this interpretation is right, the names tell their own tale. The Rumlu Corps was presumably recruited from the descendants of those Osmanli or Ottoman. Toynbee has a tendency to use a lot of idiosyncratic references. So Ottoman is a Latinization of Osmanli, or the House of Osman. So that's what that's referring to. Prisoners of war whose liberty had been obtained from Timur-Lenk by one of Ismail's ancestors. The Hamidli and the Tekli were presumably recruited from the southwest Anatolian principalities of Hamid and Tek, 2 Turkish successor states of the Anatolian Seljuk Empire, which had been conquered in AD 1381-91 and AD 1450 respectively by the Osmanlis, after the Osmanlis had grown to be a match for all the other successor states of the Seljuks combined. He's referring to all the various beyliks that came out of the collapse of the Sultanate of Rum in the early 14th century. In consequence of their conquests in Europe, Hamid and Tek had submitted perforce to the Ottoman yoke, but the people had never forgotten that their new Osmanli masters had been the least among the successors of the Seljuks in the beginning, and the consequent restiveness under Ottoman rule apparently found expression in Shi'ism. The Hamidli and the Tekli fought for Ismail Shah Safawi as their future liberator from their present Ottoman masters. Another of Shah Ismail's corps, the Dul Qadar were presumably recruited from the principality of that name in the highlands of southeastern Anatolia, which was the buffer state between the Osmanlis and the Egyptian Mamluks. The Shamli were presumably recruited from the Mamluk domains in Sham or Syria, e.g. from among the Imami Shi'is of the Jabal Amil. The Morsilis must have been Arab or Kurdish recruits from Mosul in northern Iraq, a key point on the line of the march between Isma'il's base of operations in Gilan and Shiite holy cities in Iraq. So Gilan is a region of northern Iran, just on the Caspian coastline. It's next to Azerbaijan. While his list of names would reveal Isma'il's ambitions, his prospects of success when he started on his career of conquest in AD 1500 can hardly be appreciated without a preliminary glance at the political state of the Iranic world in that year. The two governing factors in the situation were, first, the collapse and disintegration of the empire which had been established over the Oxus, Jaxartes Basin and Iran and Iraq a century earlier by Timur Lenk or Tamerlane, and second, the settled policy of the Osmanlis, which was to concentrate all their energies upon making conquest in Europe and to limit their action in Asia to the minimum necessary in order to cover their rear. Timur's empire had proved ephemeral. In western Iran and Iraq, it had not outlasted its founder's lifetime. In these regions, the dominion had passed in AD 1405, the very year of Timur's death, to Turkmen tribes of the same breed as Ismail's Afshars and Qajars. From AD 1405 to 1411, western Iran and Iraq had been partitioned between the Karakoyunlu and the Jalayids, or the Jalayirids as they're sometimes known. They were a Turco-Mongol dynasty that ruled Iraq. While since AD 1411, the two territories had been dominated by a single Turkmen tribe, the Karakoyunlu from AD 1411 to 1469, and the Ak-Kalunyu thereafter. Yes, their names. These two Turkmen confederations, so the Karakoyunlu are the black sheep Turkmens, and the Ak-Kalunyu are the white sheep Turkmens. In Khorasan and the Oxus-Jaxartes Basin, the Timurid Empire had held together in a ramshackle fashion for half a century longer, but after the death of Shah Rukh in AD 1447, it had fallen to pieces even in its homelands. During the last half of the 15th century of the Christian era, the Timurid domain in these regions was partitioned among a multitude of small, shifting, warring Timurid principalities, which presented a melancholy as contrast to the Empire of Timur, as was presented to the Empire of Charlemagne by the Carolingian principalities after the partition of Verdun in AD 843. I mean, in fairness to Charlemagne, I don't think the partition of the Carolingian Empire at Verdun was as dramatic as the collapse of the Timurids. This collapse of the Timurid power had given the Osmanlis relief without tempting them either to take their revenge for the wanton blow which Timur had dealt them, or again to indulge their ambitions by occupying the new vacuum on the Asiatic frontier. They contented themselves with restoring their Asiatic dominions to the limits at which they had stood before Timur intervened in Anatolia, and when half a century after the overthrow of Bayezid I by Timur at Angora in AD 1402, Bayezid's successor Mehmed the Conqueror, Imperabat AD 1451 to 81, found the Ottoman power sufficiently recuperated to go into action again. He deliberately pursued the established policy of his house. Again, so in 1402, the Ottoman Sultan Bayezid I had been defeated by Timur at the Battle of Ankara, where he was actually captured and imprisoned. Sort of a great setback for the Ottomans that nearly led to the destruction of their empire, as their domains fell out into civil war as many sons of Bayezid fought over the throne. In spite of his name and fame, Mehmed Padishah Osmanli was not a conqueror in the same sense as either Timur Lenk or Isma'il Shah, so far before he was not aiming at an ecumenical dominion. He's famous because he set himself with success to round off an empire which had expanded steadily with definite limits. The Osmanlis were an Iranic community which had started life in the borderland between the Iranic and Orthodox Christian worlds and had acquired an empire by conquering Orthodox Christian territories. The historical function of the Ottoman Empire builders was to bring the Orthodox Christian society's time of troubles to a close by uniting the whole of the main body of Orthodox Christendom politically into one universal state under an alien Pax Ottomanica. And this Ottoman task, which had been interrupted on the verge of completion by Timur's tempestuous passage, was duly completed by Sultan Mehmed II. Mehmed spent his life in wiping out those enclaves of territory in the Balkan and Anatolian peninsulas which had not yet fallen under Ottoman sovereignty, with one or two exceptions, e.g. the Hungarian stronghold in Belgrade and the stronghold of the Knights of St. John on the island of Rhodes and a few Venetian strongholds in the Aegean. He had substantially achieved his life work before his death in AD 1481. The conquest of the East Roman imperial city of Constantinople in 1840-53 was simply the most conspicuous achievement in his limited and definite series. On his Asiatic land frontier, Mehmed's programme included the annexation of the Greek Principality of Trebizond and the Turkish Principality of Karaman, the senior successor state of the Anatolian Seljuk Empire, and a more formidable adversary than the shadow of the East Roman Empire. And when he had conquered Trebizond in 1461 and Karaman in 1465, he refused to be drawn on farther eastward. His non-expansion policy in this quarter became apparent when he was threatened with an attack on the part of Uzun Hasan, the prince of the Akalanyu Turkmens, who was alarmed at the fall of Karaman and Trebizond, and at the same time elated by his own succession to the lordship of Iraq and western Iran. It's also worth noting that Uzun Hasan was Isma'il's grandfather on his mother's side. Mehmed forestalled this danger by an offensive defensive, invaded Uzun Hasan's territory, and inflicted a defeat on the Turkmen at Bayburt in 1473, but he made no motion to follow this victory up. It is true that Mehmed's death on the 3rd of May 1481 overtook him marching eastward again, but his objective on this occasion was probably limited to the buffer state of Dul-Qadar in southeastern Anatolia, and before his death, he had dispatched another expeditionary force in exactly the opposite direction to occupy Otranto in the heel of Italy. When these two simultaneous military enterprises at the end of Mehmed the Conqueror's reign are taken together, they give the impression that death found him still at work upon his precise and limited programme of making the Ottoman Empire conterminous with the area once covered by the East Roman and Bulgarian empires, and the Taurus Range and Trebizond marked the historical limit of the East Roman Empire in Asia. Until the appearance on the scene of Isma'il Shah Safavid, with his programme of ecumenical conquest and forcible conversion to Shi'ism, there was no indication of any Ottoman ambition to expand in Asia outside the historical limits of Orthodox Christendom at the expense of other Islamic powers, just as there is none of any Ottoman intolerance towards the Shia. The military and religious aggressiveness of Ismail eventually forced a profound change of policy upon the Osmanis on both these heads. At the outset, however, the persistent and deliberate passivity of the Ottoman policy in Asia worked together with the disintegration of the Timurid power to give Ismail Shah Safawi ambitions a free field. The derelict Timurid domain was virtually at the disposal of the first comer, and the portion of the prize that lay nearest to Ismail's base of operations in Gilan was the western half, in which the Timurid regime had not only broken down but disappeared altogether. The Akalanyu Turkmens, who had squatted in the Timurid's place in Iraq and in western Iran, were no match for the Afshar and Qajar Turkmens of Ismail, whose native nomad hardihood and energy were fortified by religious fanaticism, as well as by hereditary devotion to the family of their leader, and whose numbers were reinforced by recruits from the Shiite minority in the dominions of the Shiite paladins' Sunni adversaries. Ismail's first military success was the defeat and slaughter of the king of Shirvan, the slave of Ismail's father, Haydar, in AD 1500. The decisive victory in this first stage of Ismail's career was the overthrow of the Akalanyu at the Battle of Shirur in AD 1501 to 1502, a triumph which was followed by the crowning of Ismail in Tabriz and by the sensational inauguration of his religious policy of wholesale conversion by force. Between AD 1500 and AD 1508, the year of his conquest of Baghdad, Ismail had limited all powers and principalities, great or small, that challenged his mastery over an area which extended from the province of Shirvan at the southeastern foot of the Caucasus to the province of Kerman on the southwestern border of the Dashilut, the central desert of Iran. What were to be Ismail's relations with the petty Timurid princes who had still retained a precarious hold upon Khorasan and Transoxiana between the northeastern border of the central desert of Iran and the southern fringe of the Eurasian steppe? This question was answered for Ismail by the apparition of a rival aspirant to the Timurid inheritance who had been conquering the northeastern half of it, while Ismail had been similarly engaged in the west. This competitor was a new Eurasian nomad intruder upon Iranic soil in the shape of Shaybak or Shaybani Khan, the leader of the Uzbeks. This fresh invasion of the Islamic world by a Eurasian nomad horde within less than a century after the death of Timur Lenk was the signal proof that Timur's life work was utterly undone. It had been Timur's mission to liberate the oasis of Transoxiana from nomad domination to establish an Iranic military and political ascendancy over the Eurasian nomadic world, but Timur had turned aside from the completion of this constructive task in order to exhaust the energies of the Iranic society in barren fratricidal conflicts with the contemporary Iranic powers in Western Iran and Iraq and Hindustan and Anatolia. I'm just going to stop there, and I sort of get the comparison Toynbee's making. He's trying to sort of say that Isma'il is more of a Tamerlane than he is, say, a Mehmed the Conqueror. That's true to an extent, because, I mean, the Ottomans would come to see Isma'il as a great threat like Tamerlane, and, you know, like Mehmed with the Battle of Bayburt against Uzun Hassan. Selim I would march his own army into Eastern Anatolia in AD 1514 and defeat Ismail at the Battle of Shaldaran, which is a significant setback as it forces Ismail to withdraw from all the Kurdish lands in southeastern Anatolia and northeastern Syria and northern Iraq that he's occupied, though he's able to hold on to the rest of his empire. And despite further Ottoman campaigns and attempts, you know, the Safavids are able to survive the next couple of centuries and even rival the Ottomans as a great power. And that's the problem, because the Safavids are much more enduring and longer lasting than the Timurids would be in Iran. And I think that's largely because Ismail chose to enforce a new religious creed, that of Shia Islam, on the entire country. And he does this to bind, again, it's linked to the loyalty of the Kizilbash, because they themselves view Ismail as this kind of, you know, messiah figure. He's like the Mahdi. He's like the return of the 12th Imam, who's been spending centuries of occultation. You know, they call him, Ismail, their perfect guide. Again, their religion, again, is elements of Sufism. There's elements of pre-Islamic Turkic shamanism as well in there. So again, so what Ismail's doing is he's taking all these elements together and he's enforcing a kind of new moral order onto the country of Iran. Like, he's trying to essentially make being a Shia Muslim indistinguishable from being Iranian or Persian. And that's why I think his dynasty are much more successful long term than Tamerlane's was. So that's all I want to read of Toynbee, just to set the stage for his sort of career. But now what I want to do is I want to delve into Sufism a bit more. And so I'm now going to turn to a segment of the Muhammadah by Ibn Khaldun, where he talks about Sufism. So let's make that a bit bigger. Okay. Sufism belongs to the sciences of the religious law that originated in Islam. It is based on the assumption that the practices of its adherents had always been considered by the important early Muslims, the men around Muhammad and the men of the second generation, as well as those who came after them, as the path of truth and right guidance. The Sufi approach is based upon constant application to divine worship, complete devotion to God, aversion to the full splendor of the world, abstinence from the pleasure, property, and position to which the great mass aspire, and retirement from the world into solitude for divine worship. These things were general among the men around Muhammad and the early Muslims. Then worldly aspirations increased in the 2nd or 8th century after, and that time the special name of Sufis was given to those who aspired to divine worship. So Sufis are essentially a kind of an Islamic mystic. They're sometimes called, you may be familiar with the term dervish, and you can almost say they're a bit like an Islamic equivalent of a monk. I mean, very famously, the perennial scholar René Guénon converted to Islam and went to Egypt and became a Sufi in the 20th century. The Sufis came to represent asceticism. They developed a particular kind of perception which comes about through ecstatic experience as follows. Man as man is distinguished from all the other animals by his ability to perceive. His perception is of two kinds. He can perceive sciences and matters of knowledge, and these may be certain, hypothetical, doubtful, or imaginary. Also, he can perceive states persisting in himself, such as joy and grief, anxiety and relaxation, satisfaction, anger, patience, gratefulness, and similar things. The reasoning part active in the body originates from perceptions, volitions, and states. It is through them that man is distinguished from the other animals. Knowledge originates from evidence, grief and joy from the perception of what is painful or pleasurable, energy from rest, and inertia from being tired. In the same way, the exertion and worship of the Sufi novice must lead to a state that is the result of his exertion. That state may be a kind of divine worship. Then it will be firmly rooted in the Sufi novice and become a station for him. Or it may not be divine worship, but merely an attribute affecting the soul, such as joy or gladness, energy or inertia, or something else. The stations form an ascending order. The Sufi novice continues to progress from station to station until he reaches the recognition of the oneness of God and the gnosis, marifa, which is the desired goal of happiness. And so he's talking about the oneness of God there because one of the key tenets of Sufism is this idea called monism, which is all for one or one for all, which is this idea that, to just draw a comparison, so in Christianity, you've got the idea that, Jesus Christ has two natures. He has a divine nature and a human nature. So this idea of the physical world and the spiritual world. Well, what monism is arguing is that there's no separation between the physical and the spiritual, or the human and divine. It's all interconnected fundamentally. And so we can sort of pass from one to the other because they are one and the same. Thus, the novice must progress by stages. The basis of all of them is obedience and sincerity. Faith precedes and accompanies all of them. Their result and fruit are states and attributes. They lead to others, and again others, up to the station of the recognition of the oneness of God and of the gnosis, irfan. If the result shows some shortcoming or defect, one can be sure that it comes from some shortcoming that existed in the previous stage. The same applies to the ideas of the soul and the inspirations of the heart. The novice, therefore, must scrutinize himself in all his actions and study their concealed import, because the results of necessity originate from actions, and shortcomings in the results thus originate from defects in the actions. The Sufi novice finds out about that through his mystical experience. He scrutinizes himself as to its reasons. Very few people share the self-scrutiny of the Sufis, while negligence in this respect is almost universal. Pious people who do not get that far perform, at best, acts of obedience. The Sufis, however, investigate the results of acts of obedience with the help of mystical and ecstatic experience, in order to learn whether they are free from deficiency or not. Thus, it is evident that the Sufi's path in its entirety depends upon self-sufficiency with regard to what they do or do not do, and upon discussion of various kinds of mystical and ecstatic experience that result from their exertions. This then crystallizes for the Sufi novice in a station. From that station, he can progress to another higher one. Furthermore, the Sufis have their peculiar form of behavior and a linguistic terminology which they use in instruction. Linguistic data apply only to commonly accepted ideas. When there occur ideas not commonly accepted, technical terms facilitating the understanding of those ideas are coined to express them. Thus, the Sufis had their special discipline, which is not discussed by other representatives of the religious law. As a consequence, the science of the religious law came to consist of two kinds. One is the special field of jurists and muftis. It is concerned with the general laws governing the acts of divine worship, customary actions and mutual dealings. The other is the special field of the Sufis. It is concerned with pious exertion, self-scrutiny with regard to it, discussion of the different kinds of mystical and ecstatic experience occurring in the course of self-scrutiny, the mode of ascent from one mystical experience to another, and the interpretation of the technical terminology of mysticism is in use among them. When the sciences were written down systematically, and when the jurists wrote works on jurisprudence and the principles of jurisprudence on speculative theology, Quran interpretation and other subjects, the Sufis too wrote on their subject. Some Sufis wrote on the laws governing asceticism and self-scrutiny, how to act and not act in imitation of saints. Al-Ghazali, in the Kitab al-Ilya, dealt systematically with the laws governing asceticism and the imitation of models. Then he explained the behavior and customs of the Sufis and commented on their technical vocabulary. The science of Sufism became a systematically treated discipline in Islam. Before that, mysticism had merely consisted of divine worship, and its laws had existed in the breasts of men. The same had been the case with all other disciplines, such as Quran interpretation, the science of tradition, jurisprudence, and the principles of jurisprudence. Mystical exertion, retirement, and spiritual exercises are, as a rule, followed by the removal of the veil of sensual perception. The Sufi beholds divine worlds which a person subject to the senses cannot perceive at all. The spirit belongs to those worlds. The reason for the removal of the veil is the following. When the spirit turns from external perception to inner perception, the senses weaken and the spirit grows strong. It gains predominance and a new growth. The spiritual exercise helps to bring that about. It is like food to make the spirit grow. The spirit continues to grow and to increase. It had been knowledge, now it becomes vision. The veil of sensual perception is removed, and the soul realizes its essential existence. This is identical with perception. The spirit now is ready for the holy gifts. for the sciences of the divine presence and for the outpourings of the deity. Its essence realizes its own true character and draws close to the highest sphere, the sphere of the angels. The removal of the veil often happens to people who exert themselves in mystical exercise. They perceive the realities of existence as no one else does. They also perceive many future happenings with the help of their minds and psychic powers. They are active among the lower existentia, which that becomes the obedient to their will. The great Sufis do not think much of the removal of the veil and of activity. Among the low existentia, they give no information about the reality of anything they have not been ordered to discuss. They consider it a tribulation when things of that sort happen to them and try to escape them whenever they afflict them. The men around Muhammad practiced the kind of mystical exertion. They had a very abundant share in the acts of divine grace, but they did not bother with them. Recent mystics, then, have turned their attention to the removal of the veil and a discussion of perceptions beyond sensual perception. Their ways of mystical exercise in this respect differ. They have taught different methods of mortifying the powers of sensual perception and nourishing the reasoning spirit with exercises so that the soul might fully grow and attain its own essential perception. When this happens, they believe that the whole of existence is encompassed by the perceptions of the soul, that the essences of existence are revealed to them, and that they perceive the reality of all the essences from the divine throne to the light reign. This was said by Al-Ghazali in the Kitab al-Iya after he had mentioned the forms of mystical exercise. Just want to address a comment from Shrewd Goji. Hello, Hitman. If I may ask, I've heard dervish thoughts and orders have fallen away or been sidelined nowadays by legalistic Islam and such movements. Was Sufism always against legalism? Is it new? Well, it's interesting you say that because, as you know, I've been doing research for this Iran series, and I've been reading a lot on the jurists in the Safavid Empire, and very much as you are progressing further into the history, especially into the 17th century, post the death of Abbas the Great, the nature of the religious system in Iran does shift to much more formal religiousness, a conventional faith, and away from esotericism and Sufism. And there's actually a crackdown under a lot of these later Sheikh al-Islam, or the kind of the realm imams that are appointed by the Safavid Shahs. One in particular who cracks down is Majlesi, the Sheikh al-Islam under Shah Suleiman towards the end of the 17th century. So yes, there's a shift away from the esoteric to the exoteric. And it's only really Isma'il where you see a strong Sufistic element. And once you really get to Tamas, his son, the Sufism is really starting to fall away. Furthermore, from Shrewd Goji, as I'm late, why was it that the heart of Iran seemed to have been won over to 12 of beliefs, while Afghanistan is Sunni? I thought Afghanistan was ruled by Persia, though. What gave? Well, Afghanistan, from my understanding, was a sort of a battleground between the Safavids and the Mughals, with Western Afghanistan centered on Herat, being a very Persianized city, was part of the Safavid domains, and Eastern Afghanistan, but centered on Kabul, was actually part of the Mughal Empire, and that was actually the original core territory from which Babur, the first Mughal ruler, is able to launch raids and campaigns into India from. There's also, they fight over Kandahar in the south of Afghanistan, but it's not actually until then you get to Nader Shah that all of Afghanistan is conquered by the Safavids. But as far as I know, the Afghans do stick to Sunnism. One element of that, I think, is that though the Safavids are really radical and trying to do a lot of forced conversions to Shiism under Isma'il and Tamaz, but like this turn to a more conventional religiosity, you also, as they're trying to stabilize and consolidate their realm, the Safavids come to realize, oh wait, we can't convert everybody to Shia Islam, and so because Afghanistan's kind of on the periphery of their empire, it's probably of a low priority to convert them. That's the best explanation I can give, though there might be more that could be discovered with further research. The Sufis do not consider removal of the veil sound unless it originates in straightforwardness. People who do not eat and who retire from the world, such as sorcerers, Christians, and other ascetics, may obtain removal without the existence of straightforwardness. However, we mean only that removal which originates in straightforwardness. It may be compared with the reflections of the mirror. If it is convex or concave, the object reflected by it appears in a distorted form different from the actual form of the object. But if the mirror is flat, the object appears in its correct form. As far as the states impressed upon the soul are concerned, straightforwardness means to the soul what flatness means in a mirror. Recent Sufis who have occupied themselves with this kind of removal of talk about the real character of the higher and lower existentia, about the real character of the divine kingdom, the spirit, the divine throne, the divine seats, and similar things. Those who did not share their approach were not able to understand their mystical and ecstatic experiences in this respect. The muftis partly disapprove of the Sufis, and they partly accept them. Arguments and proofs are of no use in deciding whether the Sufi approach should be rejected or accepted, since it belongs to intuitive experience. Some details in explanation. Hadith scholars and jurists who discuss the articles of faith often mention that God is separate from his creatures. The speculative theologians say that he is neither separate nor connected. The philosophers say that he is neither in the world nor outside it. The recent Sufis say that he is one with the creatures in the sense that he is incarnate in them, or in the sense that he is identical with them and there exists nothing but himself either in the whole or in part of it. Let us explain in detail these dogmatic opinions and the real meaning of each of them, so that their significance will be clarified. We say, separateness has two meanings. It may mean separateness in space and direction. The opposite then would be connectedness. In this sense, the statement of separation implies that God is in some place either directly, which would mean direct anthropomorphism, or indirectly, which would be indirect anthropomorphism, in the way in which one speaks about God's direction. It has been reported that an early Muslim scholar similarly professed the separateness of God, but a different interpretation is possible. The speculative theologians, therefore, did not acknowledge this separateness. They said, it cannot be said that the Creator is separate from his creatures. It cannot be said that he is connected with them, because such a statement can only be made about things in space. The statement that a particular thing can be described as devoid of one concept and at the same time with the opposite of that concept depends upon whether the description is found or not. If it is impossible, the statement is not correct. It is, in fact, permissible to describe a thing as devoid of one concept and at that same time of the opposite of that concept. Thus, a solid substance may be described as not wise and not ignorant, not powerful and not weak, not causing harm and not being harmed. Now, the correctness of describing God as separate in the way mentioned is predicated upon the possibility of ascribing direction to him in the proper meaning of the word, but this cannot be done with the Creator, who is free from such a description. The other meaning of separateness is being distinct and different. The Creator is called separate from his creatures in his essence, identifying existence and attributes. The opposite is being one, mingled and merged with something else. God's separateness in this sense is assumed in the dogmas of all Orthodox people, such as the great mass of early Muslims, the religious scholars, the speculative theologians, and the ancient Sufis. A number of recent Sufis who consider intuitive perceptions to be scientific and logical hold the opinion that the Creator is one with his creatures in his identity, his existence, and his attributes. They often assume that this was the opinion of the philosophers before Aristotle, such as Plato and Socrates. This is what the speculative theologians mean when they try to speak about oneness with God, his creatures, and theology and try to refute it. They do not mean that there could be a question of two essences, one of which must be negated or comprised in the other as part of in the whole. That would be clear distinctness, and they do not maintain that to be the case. The oneness assumed by the Sufis is identical with the incarnation the Christians claim for the Messiah. It is even stranger in that it is the incarnation of something primeval in something created and the oneness of the former with the latter. Authors have occasionally tried to explain the Sufi opinions concerning the revelation of existence and the order of the realities of existence according to the approach of the people who have the theory of manifestations as compared to the people who cultivate speculation, technical terminology, and the sciences. It must be said that they have always added obscurity to obscurity. An example is Al-Farghani, the commentator on Ibn al-Farid's poem. He wrote a preface at the beginning of his commentary in connection with the origin of the world of existence from the Maker and its order. He mentions that all existence comes forth from the attribute of uniqueness, which is in the manifestation of unity. Both of them together issue from the noble essence identical with oneness and nothing else. This process is called revelation. The first degree of revelation, in Sufi opinion, is the revelation as such of the essence. This school is called that of the people of revelation, manifestations and presences. It is a theory that people cultivating logical speculation cannot properly grasp because it is obscure and cryptic. There is also a great gap between the theories of people who have vision and intuitive experience and those of people who cultivate logical reasoning. Sufi systems like the one mentioned are often disapproved of on the strength of the plain wording of the religious law, for no indication of them can be found in it anywhere. Other Sufis turn to affirming absolute oneness. This is a theory stranger than the first one to understand in its implications and details. They believe the components of everything in existence to possess powers that bring the realities, forms, and matters of the existing things into being. The elements come to being through the powers that are in them. The same is the case with matter, which has in itself a power that has brought about its existence. Composite things contain such powers implicit in the power that brought about their composition. For instance, the mineral power contains the powers of the elements of matter, and in addition, the animal power contains the mineral power, and in addition, its own power. The same is the case with the human power as compared to animal. Firmament contains the human power and something in addition. The same applies to the spiritual essences. Now the power combining everything without any particularization is the divine power. It is the power distributed over all existing things, whether they are universals or particulars, combining and comprising them in every aspect, with regard to appearance and hiddenness, and with regard to form and matter. Everything is one. Oneness is identical with the divine essence, which in reality is one and simple. The thing that divides it is the way we look at it. For instance, as to the relationship of humanity to animality, it is clear that the former is included under the latter and comes into being when it comes into being. At times, the Sufis represent the relationship as that of the genus to species in every existing thing, or they represent it as that of the universal to the particular, according to the theory of ideas. At any rate, they always try to get away from any thought of composition or manifoldness, which they think is brought about by fancy and imagination. It appears that what the Sufis say about oneness is actually similar to what the philosophers say about colours, namely that their existence is predicated upon light. When there is low light, no colours will ever exist. Thus, the Sufis think that all existing sensibilia are predicated upon the existence of some faculty of sensual perception, and in fact, that all existing intelligibilia and objects of imagination are predicated upon intellectual perception. Thus, every particular in existence is predicated upon the human faculty that perceives it. If we assume that no human being with perception exists, there would be no particularization in the existence. Existence would be simple and one. Thus, heat and cold, solidity and softness, and indeed earth, water, fire, and heaven, and the stars exist only because the senses perceiving them exist. Because particularization that does not exist in existence is made possible for the person who perceives. It exists only in perception. If there were no perceptions to create distinctions, there would be no particularization, but just one single perception, namely the eye and nothing else. They consider this comparable to the condition of a sleeper. When he sleeps and has no external sense perception, he loses in that condition all perception of sensibilia, with the exception of the things that the imagination particularizes for him. They continued by saying that a person who is awake likewise experiences particularized perceptions only through the type O1 human perception that exists in him. If he had not that something in him that perceives, there would be no particularization. This is what the Sufis mean when they say imaginary. They do not mean imaginary as a part in the sequence of human perceptions. This exposition of Sufi opinion is most erroneous. We know for certain that a country that we have quitted on our travels or to which we are travelling exists despite the fact that we do not see it anymore. We also have definite knowledge of the existence of heaven that overlooks everything, and of the stars, and of all the other things that are remote from us. Man knows these things for certain. No one would deny to himself the existence of certain knowledge. In addition, competent recent Sufis say that during the removal of the veil, the Sufi novice often has a feeling of the oneness of existence. Sufis call that the station of combination, but then he progresses to distinguishing between existent things. That is considered by the Sufis the station of differentiation. That is the station of the competent Gnostic. The Sufis believe that the novice cannot avoid the ravine of combination, and this ravine causes difficulties for him because there is a danger that he might be arrested at it and his enterprise thus come to naught. The different kinds of mystics have thus been explained. Many jurists and muftis have undertaken to refute statements by recent Sufis. They similarly disapproved of everything that they came across in the Sufi path. The truth is that discussion with the Sufis requires making a distinction. The Sufis discuss 4 topics. 1, firstly, they discuss pious exertions, the resulting mystical and ecstatic experiences, and the self-scrutiny concerning one's actions. They discuss these things in order to obtain mystical experiences, which then become a station from which one progresses to the next higher one. 2, secondly, they discuss the removal of the veil and the perceivable supernatural realities, such as the divine attributes, the divine throne, the divine seats, the angels, revelation, prophecy, spirit, and the realities of everything in existence, be it supernatural or visible. Furthermore, they discuss the order of created things, how they issue from the Creator who brings them into being, as mentioned before. 3, the third topic is concerned with activities in the various worlds and among the various created things, connected with different kinds of acts of divine grace. 4, the fourth topic is concerned with expressions that are suspect in their plain meaning. These have been called uttered by most Sufi leaders. In Sufi technical terminology, they are called ecstatic utterances. Their plain meaning is difficult to understand. There may be something that must be disproved of, or something that can be approved, or something that requires interpretation. As for their discussion of pious exertions and stations, of the mystical and ecstatic experiences that result, and of self-scrutiny with regard to possible shortcomings in the things that cause these experiences, this is something that nobody ought to reject. These mystical experiences of the Sufis are sound ones. Their realization is the very essence of happiness. As for their discussion of the acts of divine grace experienced by Sufis, the information they give about supernatural things and their activity among the created things, these also are sound and cannot be disproved, or even though some religious scholars tend to disapprove. Both of the Sufi discussion, the removal of the veil, of the reception of the realities of the higher things, and of the order in which they created things issue, falls in a way under the category of ambiguous statements. It is based upon their intuitive experience, and those who lack such intuitive experience cannot have their same mystical experience. No language can express the things that Sufis want to say in this connection, because languages have been invented only for the expression of commonly accepted concepts, most of which apply to the sensibilia. Therefore, we must not bother with the Sufi discussion on those matters. Those to whom God grants some understanding of those utterances in a way that agrees with the plain meaning of the religious law do, indeed, enjoy happiness. There are the subject expressions which the Sufis call ecstatic utterances, and which provoke the censure of orthodox Muslims. As to them, it should be known that the attitude that would be fair to the Sufis is that they are people who are removed from sense perception. Inspiration grips them. Eventually, they say things about their inspiration that they do not intend to say. A person who is removed from the sense perception cannot be spoken to. He who is forced to act is excused when he acts no matter what he does. Sufis who are known for their excellence and exemplary character are considered to act in good faith in this and similar respects. It is difficult to express ecstatic experiences, because there are no conventional ways of expressing them. Sufis whose excellence is not known and famous deserve censure for utterances of this kind, since the data that might cause us to interpret their statements so as to remove any suspicion attached to them are not clear to us. Sufis who are not removed from sense perception and are not in the grip of a state when they make utterances of this kind also deserve censure. Therefore, the jurists and the great Sufis decided that Al-Hallaj was to be killed because he spoke ecstatically while not removed from sense perception but control of his state. And God knows better. The early Sufis, those outstanding Muslims to whom we have referred above, had no desire to remove the veil and to have such supernatural perception. Their concern was to follow their methods, their models, and to lead an exemplary life as far as possible. Whenever they had a supernatural experience, they turned away from it, paid no attention to it. Indeed, they tried to avoid it. They were of the opinion that it was an obstacle and a tribulation and belonged to the ordinary perceptions of the soul, and as such was something created. They also thought that human perception could not comprise all of the existentia, and that the knowledge of God was wider, his creation greater, and his religious law more certain for guidance than any mystical experience. Therefore, they do not speak about any of their supernatural perceptions. In fact, they forbade the discussion of those things and prevented their companions, for whom the veil of sense perception was removed, from discussing the matter or from giving it the slightest consideration. They continued following their models and leading exemplary lives as they had done in the world of sensual perception before the removal of the veil, and they commanded their companions to do the same. Such ought to be the state of the Sufi novice. So that is the end of that section. So, as we can see, So Sufis are these essentially divine mystics in which, if you were to become a follower or a Sufi novice, your master Sufi, he has access to esoteric divine knowledge, which you have to earn, which he must share with you. And again, when you look at Isma'il and the Kizilbash, rather than just seeing it as a monarch and his soldiers, it's worth understanding it through this concept, this context of the Safavid order being Sufis. The Safavids or Ismail is a Vali or a Sufi saint or master, and the Kizilbash are the Sufi novices under Ismail, and they follow their perfect guide because they want, this enlightenment, this actually this esoteric knowledge that he can deliver to them. And so again, I hope reading that bit from Ibn Khaldun has helped make a lot more sense, and as to the relationship between Ismail and his Kizilbash and the early religiosity. So the last thing I want to now do is I want to now read through some of Ismail's poetry that he published, because again we get further insights into his perception of religion, his attitudes towards Sufism, his attitudes towards his Kizilbash as well. Okay, and so I'm reading from an article that was written by Vladimir Minorsky, a Russian Orientalist. Sort of Iranian culture and history is sort of his wheelhouse, and he's here got several translations of many of the divan or collection of poetry that was released by and written by Isma'il. And as I mentioned before, Ismail, when he's writing this, he's writing under a pen name or a persona called Katai. And it's interesting, he chooses to write all of this in Azeri Turkic rather than Persian, despite that, again, Persian language being associated with this glorious high poetry. And this really, I think, further illustrates how important Ismail sees his relationship with his Kizilbash. He puts his poems in Azeri Turkic because he is addressing it to his Kizilbash, so it has to be in a language that they can understand. So again, you can almost say that this is somewhat like his sort of poetic and Sufi sermons he's giving to them, and this is how he imparts the esoteric enlightenment onto them. So that Sultan of, actually, let's zoom this in a bit more. This should be better for people to read. So poem number 7. That Sultan of generosity is the master of reason. His sanctity and the light of the eyes. Should the Ghazis put on their swords and arms, fear of danger will invade the soul of hypocrites. Let Yazid's host be 100,000. One man from the host of sanctity is enough to defeat them. Should the Shah with a glance make a sign, before it all, the Gales and the Marvans will be scattered. The moon-faced Shah can be recognized by the Taj on his head and the precious belt round his waist. The one who does not find the way to the mystery of the sanctity is a blind man and an ignorant fool. When the Ghazis enter the arena, the outsiders will be utterly under their feet. Know for certain, Ali is the sea of truth. He is the eternal life of honor. The day of the Ghazis, by the red pennons and banners, don their red Taj will be the day of mourning. Mulwi's host on seeing one Ghazi will grow worse than that sheep at which a wolf clutches. The Akis who recognize the peer are true pearls. Those whose word is but one are true men. In the path of the Shah, Katai sacrifices his soul, to say nothing of the kingdom, property, gold, and silver. So again, several interesting elements here. So again, that Sultan of generosity is the master of reason. Again, ultimately, he's saying that a monarch or a ruler is the source of knowledge and rationality. And these references to this word Ghazi that comes up a lot. So Ghazi is a Turkic word, and it's an expression used to describe a holy warrior. And so it's usually an honorific that's given to many famous Turkish warriors or sultans or begs. And so when he's saying Ghazi, he's talking about the Kizilbash because they are these holy warriors. Okay, and these names like Yazid's host and talking about Marwan and Muawiyah, here he's referencing the Umayyad caliphs because Ismail and and his Qizilbash being Shia, they venerate the Imam Ali. Ali was again during the first fitna, which was the sort of caliphate civil wars, where the Umayyads under Muawiyah are challenging the reign of Ali. Again, they see the Umayyads as these heretics for not recognizing Ali as the true proper caliph. So again, there's that reference. And Yazid here was the caliph. He was the son of Muawiyah, and he's the caliph when you have the massacre of Karbala, where you have the martyrdom of Hussein, the son of Ali, the grandson of Muhammad, and the third Shia Imam, a very important event in the history of Shia Islam. So again, Isma'il is rallying his Qizilbash to take on and defeat the heretical hordes, no matter how many of them that there are. And I've also found it interesting that when he's using this persona, Isma'il is referring to himself as the Shah in like the third person. So I don't know, I can't help but feel that it's almost like the Shah is like his real self, his real political self, and Katai is like his spiritual Sufi self. So it's almost like a kind of like an esoteric conscience. Just going to have a comment from Shrivd Goji. I heard that Sufi-like evangelists working in India spurred on new Hindu schools of thought, which are important even nowadays, and now influence New Age thought. 6-2 grew in this border. That's interesting. I'm not that familiar with Hinduism or Sikhism, especially modern evangelism. So I might have to look into that one day. Okay. Excellent. Poem number 15. My name is Shah Isma'il. I am God's mystery. I am the leader of all these Ghazis. My mother is Fatima. My father is Ali. And eke I am the peer of the 12 Imams. I have recovered my father's blood from Yazid. Be sure that I am of the Haydarian essence. I am the living Khidir and Jesus, son of Mary. I am the Alexander of my contemporaries. Look you, Yazid, polytheist and adept to the accursed one. I am free from the Kaaba of hypocrites. In me is prophethood and the mystery of holiness. I follow the path of Muhammad Mustafa. I have conquered the world at the point of my sword. I am the Kanbar of Mutadi Ali. My sire is Safi, my father Haydar. Truly, I am the Jafar of the audacious. I am a Husseinid and have curses for Yazid. I am Katai, a servant of the Shahs. So, again, more religious references. So, my mother is Fatima, my father is Ali. Again, he's essentially almost claiming that I'm a reincarnation of obviously Ali, the Caliph, his wife Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad. Again, he's almost like saying he's Hussein, the martyred Hussein, the third Imam. And again, I am the peer of the 12 Imams. Again, I am like an Imam. I am this great religious Shia leader. And again, I've recovered my father's blood from Yazid. Be sure that I am of the Haydarian essence. So that's a reference to Haydar's father, who was killed in battle with the Shirvan Shahs. And so Minorski believes that this poem was probably written after Ismail had killed the leader of the Shirvan Shahs in battle, therefore avenging his father's death. But again, linking it back to Yazid, the caliph that had murdered, that was responsible for the martyrdom of Hussein. Again, sort of linking this all together, the past and the future. Again, leaning into the idea of reincarnation. And again, it's interesting, this reference to Jesus, son of Mary, because I found it really fascinating, but I found that in Shia Islam, there's this interesting belief where they believe that when the 12th Imam returns, essentially a Shia equivalent of the second coming of Jesus, they also believe that Christ is going to accompany the 12th Imam. So it's interesting, you've kind of got this sort of syncretic kind of Christian element creeping in to Shia Islam. And also this, I am the Alexander of my contemporaries. Again, he's referencing Alexander the Great, which is interesting considering, Ismail is the Shah of Iran, and he's exemplifying Alexander the Great, the man who conquered the Persian Empire. And so, but ultimately, Alexander is this great heroic conqueror, and again, the divine connection there is also prevalent because Alexander famously, declared that he was the son of Zeus, and so did his mother, share that about. So again, like Alexander, Isma'il is claiming a divine descent, a divine heritage. And again, look, you Yazid, polytheist and adept of the accursed one. I am free from the carver of hypocrites. So this is a reference, I believe, to the early faith of the Arabs prior to their conversion to Islam, because the Umayyads were led by a figure called Abu Sufyan, who was the primary antagonist of the Prophet Muhammad. And so there's this idea that the Umayyads weren't true believers in Islam, that they only were sort of Johnny come lately, so to speak. And so there's always this like doubt over their sincerity as quote true Muslims. And again, it means the prophethood in the mystery of the holiness. I follow the path of Muhammad Mustafa, and then I am the Kambar of Mutada Ali, and then I'm truly the Jafar of the audacious. These are all other imams, Shia imams. So again, really further emphasizing that he's sort of, I'm in communion with all of these great religious antecessors of mine. Okay, and we have number 18. O fighters in the path of God, say, Allah, Allah, I am the faith of the Shah. Come to meet me, prostrate yourselves. I am the faith of the Shah. In flying, I am a parakeet. I am the leader of a mighty army, a companion of Sufis. Wherever you sow me, I will grow. Whenever you call me, I will come up. I shall catch the Sufis by the hand. I was on the gibbet with Mansur, with Abraham in the fire, and with Moses on Sinai. Come from the eve, celebrate the new year, join the king. With discernment, come to know the king. O Ghazis, prostrate yourselves. I wear a red crown, my charger is grey. I lead a mighty army. I have the virtues of the prophet Joseph. I am Katai, my charger is Sorel. My words are sweeter than sugar, are the essence of Mutada Ali. I am the faith of the Shah. Know for certain that Katai is of defined nature, that he is related to Muhammad Mustafa. He is issued from Safi. He is a scion of Junaid and Haydar. He is related to the Ali Mutada. For the love of Hassan, he has entered the arena, for he is related to the Hussein of Kabbalah. He possesses the qualities of the other Imams. He is like a beggar at the gate of Mahdi, master of the time. My name is Vali Shah Isma'il. My surname is Katai. Okay, so just to go over these two I've just read, and one other point, just going back to this previous one with the reference to Alexander, another point of comparison you can make is, like Alexander having his companions who accompany him on his great conquests, Ismail has his own companions in the form of the Kizilbash. And so with this 18, again, this idea of prostration, again, very much echoing back to this ancient Persian idea of because the Achaemenid kings always would expect the subjects to kneel or prostrate themselves before them. And again, it's also something you see in other Oriental cultures, such as the Chinese kowtow. So again, living up to this this Persian sort of kingly heritage. Okay, and then we also have these again. I was on the gibbet with Mansur, with Abraham in the fire, and with Moses on the Sinai, again, linking himself to all these great Abrahamic prophets. I have suffered like they have. I have the same, divine wisdom as they do. And again, more references to Mutada Ali, again, an imam. And then for 22, again, he's claiming descent from Muhammad Mustafa, again, an imam. And then he's talking about his lineage all the way from Safi. And also linking himself to Hussein being massacred at Kabbalah. And again, there's him directly as well at the final line, referring himself as to a Bali or to a saint. Number 30. Do not think, O moon-faced one, that my soul remains to me after thou hast gone. My soul has gone after you, and only the impotent body remains to me. Since thou hast quitted my side, a piece of my heart, only the dream of my joining you keeps watch over my heart. Although the flower garden of thy beauty has gone from my eyes, in my heart grows the stately poplar of thy sunny forms. Let that peri-like idol be hidden from my looks. The moon in the sky is for me a symbol of her face. From the moment this sick-hearted Katai became separated from thee, the musk of thy fragrant tresses has remained with me as a perfume spreader. Mm. Again, I'm not so sure about the meaning of this one. I just think this is just some general, quite very beautiful poetry. To again, the references to the flower garden and beauty, and again, well, Iran has this tradition of horticulture, so perhaps there's an element of that coming in as well. But again, I think this talk of the dream and the joining, again, I think that perhaps leading into this, the Sufi idea of preternatural perception of the dream and spiritual world. So perhaps we could say, I don't know, maybe Isma'il had like a vision one day, and this poem is him, turning that vision, into these sort of literary stanzas. Number 92. There is a commandment in God's books. Know for certain that it decrees blood for blood. May my head be a sacrifice on the path of the guide of truth. There are many hundreds like me, ready to destroy their lives. O Katai, thou hast a hand. How thoroughly hast thou defeated Yazid? Mayst thou be ruler of the world as long as the world exists. The blood of Shah Haydar is still unavenged. Yazid still awaits a crushing defeat. Truly, in the path of love, sincerity is wanted. Go away, thou accursed denier. There is a doubt in thee. I call thee denier. Thou dost not see that the companion to truth possess evidence clearer than the sun. Treading this path in the state of impurity, how canst thou deny the word? There is some blood unavenged. Go, O Zephyr, it is a high time to represent to the Shah in what state I am. Rise and march, O Katai, make a journey, for thy paternal home is in the town of Ardabil. And so again, this poem must have been written when he was very young, because he becomes Shah at 15, shortly after defeating the Shirvanshahs and avenging his father's death. So this must be when he was obviously in exile. And again, referring to Ardabil, his hometown, his plan to return home and seek vengeance for his father's death. Number 101. From pre-eternity, the Shah is our Sultan, our peer, and Murshid, our soul. Having pronounced the name of the Shah, we have walked along this path. We are Husseini today in our period. We are the slaves of the Imams in all sincerity. Our token is to be martyrs and ghazis. Our path is narrow, narrower than anything. This time our fundamental rule is to give our heads away. I am Katai. From pre-eternity, I am the master of Haydar. He who does not recognize him as truth is a stranger to us. Again, reinforcing this link to Hussein, the martyred Imam, and to his father as well. Number 102. In the arena of love, he who risks literally plays his head and life, sports wantonly with the eyes, eyelashes, and eyebrows before the beloved. On the path of the King of Men, there are many people, but praise to the head which alone opposes 1,000 heads. Let him be an intimate friend of the Shah, who is ready to part with his head and life. Do not think that a common Farash word would be allowed to flirt in the presence of the beloved. On the day of battle, many give up their heads and lives, but should someone self-willed stay behind, the Gulbash will make him play. O Katai, do not grieve if all has become your enemies. A challenger always flings bricks and stones from afar. Again, it's almost like he's girding the Kizilbash to, though you may go into battle and though you may suffer injury or death, no, it is worth it to vanquish your enemies so you can be righteous and again acquire the esoteric divine truth. So number 103, so got some commentary from Minorski on this one. The meaning of this poem is dark. The author considers three eventualities: the beauty, Shah Isma'il himself, either sits quietly or rises for a moment, or comes out of the palace. The corresponding results grow more and more terrific. Verses 2 and 3 refer to Ismail's enemies. Should the people of Chauvin, responsible for the death of Ismail's grandfather and father, attack Tabriz, the last judgment is reserved for them. In Baghdad, the Ak-Kalanu hordes may be numerous, but Ismail will destroy this home of the Arabs. Shah Ismail killed the Shirvanshah Farrukh Yassar in 1509. After the expulsion of the Ak-Kalanus, Iraq was occupied in 1508. Consequently, the unsettled situation which is reflected in the poem is earlier than 1508, and the poem must have been written when Ismail when he was 20 years old or even younger. Should my beauty sit with crossed legs, groans will be roused in the world. Should he rise and sit down, the ordeal of the end of the world will burst out. Let all the people of Chauvin rush to Tabriz. The Persian Ajam kingdom will but ask, when is the last day to come? As he arrives, the streets and homes of the Arabs will cease to exist. However, many Turkomans may turn out from Baghdad. If my beauty comes out of the palace, the tomb will engulf the stock of the world, and the guide to the Tariqat, old and young at the same time, will suddenly appear. Since in pre-eternity Katai had contemplated the certainty of this issue, the signs of Noah have appeared in him, and the flood is to burst out. Yeah, again, it's almost like Isma'il is working himself up into a frenzy as the poems progress, because again, Sufis, when they perform, their dancing or their, the whirling dervishes or the spiritual acclamations, they really work themselves up into this divine spiritual frenzy. So it's almost like as he's writing this, he's having like a prophetic vision or something. Number 123. Thy numerous arrows have pierced my breast, which is burning with fire. They came in multitudes. Thy arrows, they did not pour water where water was needed. You would think that fledglings are flying with screams. Every moment as thy arrows leave the bow, they make me groan. On the square of my breast they have formed an army in fighting array. Thou art my king over the land, where thy arrows are arrayed in review. I am the dying of that pain, and the groans of my suffering have annihilated my heart. Like flying arrows have not even left my soul in my body. No wonder you make a lattice of Katai's breast, for thy arrows pierce armor, coats of mail, and shields of steel. Again, Isma'il is almost putting himself into a position of martyrdom and sacrifice. And what's really interesting is the exact nature of martyrdom in this poem is very similar to the martyrdom of Saint Sebastian, who was also killed by being penetrated with many arrows. So again, I've talked about this kind of like weird sort of pseudo-Christian elements creeping into Shia Islam. So again, that's like another element of that. And just some further thoughts of mine on this persona of Katai. It's almost like Isma'il is putting himself in the shoes of one of his Kizilbash, and I can't help but think of in the Shakespeare play Henry V. Henry V goes amongst his men before the Battle of Agincourt to try and provide encouragement for them and try and peek into their minds and thoughts about their concerns. And so again, it's almost like Isma'il is doing something very similar, but in a poetic form. Again, he's lowering himself down to be one of them, and he's looking at things from their perspective. Because ultimately he needs them to rally to his cause and fight for him and not to waver. Number 168. It is I who have come now for this epoch. I've set myself in motion and have entered a soul. I am intoxicated with love for the Shah and dazzled by him. As a lover, I have come to my family home. By God, I was sorely longing for the Shah. Thanks to God, I have now come to the sanctuary. I shall uproot Yazid and the heretics. A burning, I have come to the source of light. By the Shah's command, I have come in pre-eternity. Do not be troubled, for now I have come again. From pre-eternity, I am in love with the 12 Shahs. But now I have come to this shop. Solomon's ring and the staff of Moses, I have come to the world as Noah during the flood. Muhammad's miracles, the Shah's sword, Dul Fikar are signs in my hands. Here I have come. I shall exterminate the outsiders from the world. I am Katai. I've come to serve as a proof of the truth. Again, further references to Muhammad. And what's interesting, he's talking about Solomon's ring. Again, he's referring to the King Solomon, the ancient king of the Jews, and again the staff of Moses. So he's claiming sort of great, sort of Abrahamic prophet-like nature and kingship. And again, this idea of exterminating outsiders as well. I can't help but draw a connection to Zoroastrianism, where you've got the dualism, you've got the eternal struggle between Ahura Mazda and Ahriman, and again, it's almost like there's this sort of the Shia have inculcated these aspects of Zoroastrianism into Shia Islam, and this is how it's manifesting itself. So again, outsiders, it's almost like these demonic creatures from another spiritual plane, and this is who Ismail's enemies are, and this is who the Kizilbash needs to fight and destroy. So they're literally on this sort of holy, anti-demonic crusade, so to speak. Number 194. Though my truly beloved is now sultan in the world, if my friend accept my soul, today it is his sacrifice. A man, if thou hast brains, give not thy heart to the world. He who does so shows ignorance on the path. Those who do not recognize Ali as truth or God are absolute unbelievers. They have no creed, no faith, and are not Muslims. If you capture one heart for you, it will amount to 100. If you destroy one heart, 100 Meccas will lie in ruins. O Katais, life is a boon to profit by. Know thyself, tomorrow we shall die, but today life is still a guest in your body. Again, in this one, leaning more into this idea of death and martyrdom. And something else I've not mentioned, there's a very strong fatalistic element in Ismail's attitude, and I think it really comes through in his poetry. He very much believes everything is sort of preordained, and that he's simply living out these ideas. And again, this is another link back to Zoroastrianism, because specifically a sub sort of sect of Zoroastrianism called Zervanism, where in particular a subset of that called fatalistic Zervanism, where Ahura Mazda and Ahriman are actually the twin sons of another deity called Zervan, who is a truly neutral god and is the god of time. And they believe that Zervan proclaims that which of his sons is born first will reign for 9,000 years. And so Ahriman, in anticipation, breaks himself out and ensures he's born first. So Zervan addresses him, okay, you shall rule for 9,000 years, but Ahura Mazda, your brother, will succeed you one day. And so again, this idea of almost like a second coming of Ahura Mazda, the second coming of the 12th Imam. Isma'il is the physical manifestation of this. Number 195. Today I have come to the world as a master. Know truly that I am Haydar's son. I am Faridun, Khusro, Jamshid, and Zohak. I am Zal's son, Rustam, and Alexander. The mystery of the Anal Haq is hidden in this my heart. I am the absolute truth, and what I say is truth. I belong to the religion of the adherents of the valley, and on the Shah's part, I am a guide to everyone who says I am a Muslim. My sign is the crown of happiness. I am the signet ring on Solomon's finger. Muhammad is made of light, Ali of mystery. I am a pearl in the sea of absolute reality. I am the Katai, the Shah's slave for the shortcomings. At thy gate, I am the smallest and the last servant. And now this is the first time we're really seeing a reference we've not seen before, where in the second line, I am Faridun, Khusro, Jamshid, and Zohak. These are all famous kings of Iran, which are all featured in the Shahnameh, or the Book of Kings, the great mythical work of poetry by Ferdowsi. And again, Isma'il is very fascinated by the tales in the Shahnameh, because, for example, he actually names 3 of his 4 sons after characters, including his heir Tamazb. And again, Rustam is a famous Iranian hero that's also in the Shahnameh as well. So not only is he leaning on sort of Shia myth, he's also leaning on ancient Persian and Iranian myth. So again, it's almost there are 2 pillars to Isma'il. There is the religious side, the Shia side, the Sufi side, but then there's also his role as the Shah of Iran. And so these are two. These things are complementary to buttress his legitimacy. Number 204. I am God's eye. Come now, O blind man, gone astray to behold truth. I am the absolute doer of whom they speak. Sun and moon are in my power. My being is God's house. Know it for certain. Prostration before me is incumbent on thee. In the morn and even know for certain that with the people of recognition, heaven and earth are all truth. Do not stray. The garden of sanctity has produced a fruit. How can it be plucked by a shorthand one? If you wish to join truth to truth, here is God who has reached the stage of Mim. The one of pure connections considers his own person, suddenly Katai has come by a treasure. Again, he's really leaning into a lot of Sufi beliefs. So again, this idea of you know being of the people of recognition, heaven and earth are all truth. Do not stray from the path. Do not stray from the path of the Sufi. And again, leaning back into monism, that this is all one and interconnected and joining truth to truth. So number 211, a flower has blossomed on the tree and has now come to be a companion to the Shah. In pre-eternity, it was the mystery of the Shah, and now it has come to be a companion of his mystery. No one can become a Kizilbash until his heart is a burning and his breast a bleeding like a ruby. In the time of the mystery of Kuntu Kanzan, he was the light of Muhammad, and now he has manifested himself to the world crowned with a red crown. His name is Isma'il. He is Humusian with the Prince of the Faithful. On seeing him, the outsiders would prefer to turn to stone. So the Prince of the Faithful, it's interesting he's using this term because the Prince of the Faithful is a second title that's used by the caliphs of Islam. So Caliph or Caliphate, a successor, and then the title of Emir al-Mu'minin or Prince or Commander of the Faithful. So in the Sunni tradition, yes, that's what Ali would be called because he literally was the Caliph. But obviously in the Shia tradition, they refer to him as an Imam, not as Caliph. So it's interesting that Ismail is referring to Ali in this way. Another comment from Shrewd Goji. Last question, I'll stop pestering you. Did you say why Shah Ismail calls himself the moon-faced one? I'm sure you know of the Fatimids. How did the Safavid sway Iran while Egypt stayed Sunni? I'm going to be honest, I'm not really sure what he means by moon-faced one. I'm possibly thinking, because again, he likes to refer to himself as a kind of beauty or handsome. So I think that's possibly what that it's kind of like a metaphor that the moon is bright, shining, and beautiful. I think that's what he's doing there. Regarding the Fatimids, well, I'd have to look more into that. The only thing I know is that the Fatimids, yes, they were they're quite novel, as in they established their own Shia caliphate in rivalry to the Abbasid Sunni caliphate, and they do conquer Egypt. But most of the population do not adhere to that faith. But again, I'm not quite sure of the reason, so I don't know whether they just didn't impose or forcibly convert anyone, or whether they did and then there were conversions back. Again, I'd have to look more into that. But as Ron was talking about Iran and Egypt, one comparison which I find fascinating is both Iran and Egypt are countries that are ancient. They have these ancient grand empires. You've got the ancient kingdom of Egypt and the Persian Empire and the Sassanid Empire, and yet Iran, despite the Arab conquest and all of these changes and process of history, they still have a cultural memory of that time, and they're still very proud of it. Whereas it feels like to me the Egyptians seem to have just completely forgotten their own ancient heritage and almost seem completely disinterested in it. And well, certainly not nowhere near as interested as the Iranians are, and I have to wonder why that is. And thank you for your work. Is there a book you'd recommend on Ismail? I'd like to learn much more. His poems are quite lovely in a way. Well, I don't have any books in particular, as in specific books on him. The only thing I can recommend is other than because this poetry I'm reading, if you check the description of the stream, I've got a link to it on JSTOR, so you can read this poetry for yourself if you want to. In terms of books and material, if you acquire the volume 1 of the Study of History, and Toymy's got a section in the annexes which I read part of, which is a very good biography of Ismail. There are other books out there. The main book I'm using for the Iran series is called Iran: A Modern History by Abbas Armanat. Though that's a very broad history, and he only spends about half a chapter on Ismail. Another historian, though, that I know Armanat is relying on is a fellow called Roger Savory. He's an expert on the Safavid, so I'll probably point you in the direction of Savory. I do know there is also a biography of Shah Ismail by a fellow called, I think it's Ghulam Sawa from about 1939. though I'm not sure if that's been translated into English. So I might have to further look into that. Okay. Okay, so poem 237. I'm the one intoxicated with beauty who has come today. I'm always with God, but today I've come here. Beware, do not take me for a stranger. I'm that very ravisher of hearts whom you know. In this world, recognize me, O ignoramus, for I am that veracity and purity which you have heard. Today I am the God sent calamity to smite with a sword the soul of the hypocrite. O people of the true religion, on behalf of the lover, I sacrifice my soul. The outsider considered me as non truth, but I am acquainted with the king. Know that I am constantly joined to truth and separate from non-truth. From the highest point of the sky, I've come as a hume for the mystics. I've come to suffer death in my soul on behalf of all souls. I am Katai who offers his soul as a sacrifice. Again, referencing back to beauty, um, you know, commitment to not being an ignoramus, to veracity or truth and purity. And again, today I'm the God sent calamity to smite with a sword the soul of the hypocrite. Again, by following me, you're following the true word of God, and I will lead you away from ignorance. Number 249. By the Lord, come and behold, God's light has reappeared. Muhammad Mustafa, the seal of the prophets has come. The hearts of the lovers are gladdened. The luck of the faithful is revealed. The spirit of the believers is awake. Purity has come. For every land and every period, this is the blessed wheel of the Advent. From the heavens, from the angels, thousands of welcomes reach. The perfect guide has arrived. Faith has been brought to all. All the Ghazis are full of joy at the coming of the seal of the prophets. A man has become a manifestation of truth. Prostrate thyself. Pander not to Satan. Adam's put on new clothes. God has come. An angel has descended from the skies. Good tidings to the men of mystic knowledge. Death has descended upon the outsiders. Calamity has befallen the Yazids. Darkness was the cause that amidst errings thou hast lost the lamp. Open thy eyes, come out of the darkness, for faith has appeared like a full moon in the dark night. God's friend Abraham has put on a new garment and come to life. His name is Isma'il. Let souls be his sacrifice, for an appeal has come from God. O my beautiful Shah, my moon, the fulfillment of my desires, the beloved of my heart, O thou, in whose beauty God manifests himself, the elect of the saints has come. Do not succumb to the arrow of hypocrisy of the demon called Azazel. The guiding Imam has come. Seize his hand, show him the way. The Pharaoh has subjugated the world by magic, but the staff of Moses has become a dragon to swallow up. The heroic Ghazis have come forth with crowns of happiness on their heads. The Mahdi's period has begun. The light of eternal life has dawned upon the world. His eyes the letter Sad. His tongue is Taha. His cheeks are Kaf and Al-Quran. His eyebrows are the letter Nun. His hair reminds one of Al-Lail. His face is the sun in its splendor. With all your heart, accept the sign of Imam Shah Haidar. My Imams Jafari, Siddiq, and Ali Musa Rida have come. The heart-worn Qatayz longs for the beauty of that Shah and for the union with him. Surrender thy old soul and thereby acquire a new one. For a science has appeared which is worth the soul. Again, there's a lot going on in this one. Again, he's being very revelatory. Again, truth, purity. It's almost like he's just giving a sermon, and again, he's referencing himself as the perfect guide, the seal of the prophets. Again, we'll talk about Egypt. So he's mentioned the idea of the Pharaoh has subjugated the world by magic, but the staff of Moses has become a dragon to swallow up. Again, referencing to the Moses and the flight of the Jews from Egypt. But it's also noting that in an Islamic context, the term Pharaoh is used to refer to a ruler that's seen as heretical or illegitimate. So very famously, the Islamic extremists who assassinated the president of Egypt, Anwar Sadat, claimed that they had eliminated Pharaoh when they struck him down. So again, there's that element as well. And again, a beautiful Shah, my moon. Again, this idea of the moon as a symbol of beauty and grace. And then referring Mahdi is a word that means prophet, ultimately. And again, referring to his the imams of Shia Islam and also his Sufi forebears in this final stanza. Okay, we've been going for an hour and a half, so I want to wrap this up. So I'm going to go to the very last poem that's in this collection, because it's quite a bit of a lengthier one, and there's a lot of ideas going on. Okay, Mafnavi number 3. The Mafnavi number 3 holds a special place by itself among Katai's poems. Its poetical merits are nil, but the leisurely epic metre and the unconventional flow of oratory gave the poet much more freedom than the shorter poems on religious and love subjects, both in vocabulary and grammar in its original. The Mafnavi opens with a praise to God, in which stress is laid upon the diversity of God's creatures. Inequality is the law of the world, but claims to superiority which must be examined. God is the helper and will assist the brave prince, leading his lads to conquests. Isma'il challenges the heroes of the Shahnameh and complains of the absence of a worthy opponent. No success is to be achieved without struggle. God's assistance is invoked in the coming strife. Brave men are not afraid of death. The Mafnavi ends with a final appeal to God. So, in the name of God, living and bountiful, for his might and his nature is old. It is he who exalts the 9 heavens, purifies the face of the earth. He produces the storm like unto Simoon. By the wind of the day of resurrection he softens stones to wax. He makes some superior to others, some is suspense and some lowly. Some like Solomon and some like ants, some vilified and some strong. He makes some superior to the whole world, and some a refuge to men. He makes some lords of the world, and while he treats some as flowers, he creates others as fawns. He makes some sit on the throne and wear a crown. He makes others needy for half a farthing. He makes them awful like Rustam, and others less than a small hair. Some endowed with courage, others without courage, and some carrion-like. To some he gives swords and good horses, while he checkmates others on their carpet. He creates some as if to stand as Alexander's wall, and some as if to flee like deserters. God is the creator of all. He is cognizant of everybody's affairs. Has he not created 5 fingers to a narrow hand so that each of them should know its way? Were all the world equal, but how would the affairs of the world be successful? Surely there is difference between slave girls and a man. Heaven and earth are not equal. A man must know his perfection and do what work he can do. A mouse in the desert says, I am wicked, but when it is confronted with an enemy, it loses its way. Do not believe such pretensions before you have scanned them. Do not lean on the wall of an unmanly person. God is the helper in this world. In bad days, he shares the sorrow of his slaves. A brave beg will conquer all lands, all Asia Minor, China, Khorasan, and Syria. Is he a man who marches with an army against a single man? Is an army necessary to crush an enemy? In a fight, lads would crush one single man, but in an army, the beg becomes a leader of men. I am he who will fight a crocodile and wage war with the tiger and the panther. I am such that should I meet Afrasiab, I will smite his head with my mace and stun him. I am he who will march without fear against the foe. Do not be afraid that on looking at him I shall show hesitancy. I shall smash the fortress of Khaybar with my fist. Shall I ever fear cannon and guns? I shall conquer Asia Minor and Syria, and then think of the Franks. Should Afrasiab be my foe, I shall take it for an dishonor to come to blows with him. Should something happen to you in a fight, turn not your back, run not with shouts towards your companion. A pity would that there was a suitable occasion that the foe should see a man better than himself. A pity would that Isfandiar existed now, that I might spare neither his throne, nor his kingdom, nor his country. A pity would that Afrasiab were there, that I might answer his challenge with my sword. A pity would that Give lived nowadays, that I might appear to him like a male div. A pity would that Zal were alive now, that he might see what a struggle is like. A pity would that the hero Sarab were now in existence. He would not be striking with his sword in his hand. A pity that on the battlefield I am tied to females, that I encounter but effeminates and cowards. A pity that there is no longer a price for a man, for a hero breaking through the enemy line for a male lion. Neither Rustam nor Bijan are my opponents. A female wanted to command me. I wish there were a great fight that I might encounter the foe face to face. They would know that a man has been born of a mother. Every one would hear news of his talents. A hero eats his bread in a manly way. This word was said by the best of the braves, or by one of the braves. How can one eat bread without labour? Every piece of bread in it is in a dragon's mouth. Go and annihilate the dragon. Snatch that bread from his mouth. O God, sharpen my sword that it should smite the foe seeking my life. Exalt my sire through my hand. Let my sire run at the envious enemy. Let not the foe spit into my face, but rather at my dead body. Let 30,000 men be my enemies, each one of them be Rustum-like. When I make up my mind to tackle the field, let them come and let me fight them alone. Let me smite them all with my sword, so that they should forget their designs in their attack. Are their braves annoyed by death? Shall I keep this bag of ungnawed bones? Nobody says to the one devoid of energy, this is a man, better is death for a liar licking ardour. Do not associate me with cowards who in the eyes of a man are less than females. Length of my sword, that I reach the enemy and scatter before me in his array and his right flank. Even for an Isfandia, I shall make the field too narrow. No lion or panther will stand my blows. O Lord, show me thy friendliness, and though the foe be a Rustum, I will smash him. O God, accept my prayer for my needs, my supplication at thy gate, and my appeal to thee. Through the merits of my prophet, who is a miracle of speech, and of Ali, who is the perfect Imam, they do not turn away from their faces, but on this path made sacrifice of their beings. Pray, let me work havoc in the ranks of the foe, for only by the sword can the foe be smashed. So be abashed. Okay, and that is the end of that last poem. So thank you for everybody for watching. I'm just going to check if we've had any super chats. Hang on. Just need to refresh entropy. Okay. Right, no super chats. So again, well, thank everybody for watching again. This was I'm really glad I did this stream because I got to share the great sort of esoteric elements to Isma'il, which I think help further give a lot more explanatory power to his character, because when I do the other stream where we're going through the early Safavids, I feel at times sometimes his behaviour can seem a little unusual or frustrating, and I think going through the nature of his Sufistic beliefs has probably helped shine a light on that. So again, thank you all for watching, and good night.